Okay, so last topic for me, that's the most personal, the one that really grinds my gears.
Grinds your gears.
The one that I'm allergic to. Literally, I will leave a room, I will end a relationship, I will do whatever it takes to avoid it, which is truly bad listeners. Now, you can bucket it into bad conversationalists, but like we were saying earlier, I think there's sometimes people who are bad conversationalists who actually are entertaining in their own right, just for how different they engage. But people who are bad listeners, and I have a few examples of types of bad listening, okay? And you'll know this as I bring up these categories.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear this.
Okay. So there's the keyword listeners. So these are the kind of people who they're kind of half paying attention to what you're saying. They're hearing the key words of your sentence. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're doing that is just so they can kind of get the gist, and then they can jump in with their own bullshit.
They want to know what relates to them and they can talk about maybe, or...
Yes. Yeah. Because they don't care what you're saying necessarily. They just want to look cooler or entertaining or be the center of attention. So they're just keyword listening, and then they just jump in with
last time I scuba dived in the Maldives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Or I had a cousin who did, it didn't have to be into them. It could just be like someone they know and they jump in just hearing the keyword. So that's one that sucks. Related to those is, the one-uppers.
The one-uppers?
The one-uppers is a whole separate category of douche that like is painful. And usually people like, with all of these that I'm going to get into, the fact that they haven't changed, especially as you get into your 30s as a grown adult, if you still have these characteristics, it means you have no person who truly loves you enough to call you out.
Yeah. That's part of the framework of someone has to say something, right?
True.
Could be you.
It could be me. Or I could leave the room. Because that's what I've been doing.
One of those is easier than the other, but yeah.
No, I agree. And so the one-uppers is easy. They hear what you said and they're like, well, this happened to me. Like the worst version, like I told you, I listen to podcasts a lot. And the most notorious one in the podcast community is Bert Kreischer. He's a comedian. He's not funny. He had one of the biggest flops of movies of all time.
What movie?
It was called The Machine, which was based on like a semi-fictional story that he, I guess, experienced in Russia. I'm not even going to get into it at all. But the point is he's like a mid-level comedian at best, mm-hmm. more of a storyteller guy, but got big in the podcast world through this Joe Rogan. He was part of that group.
He was like in the Joe Rogan circle or something? Like he was on this podcast?
He was friends and through some of these stories and all that. Do you know the movie Van Wilder?
Yeah, I actually like it.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Supposedly, because you know how he was like a 7th year student in college?
Yeah.
At some random university.
Is it about him?
It's supposedly about this guy. So there was an article written about him back when he was at Florida State, which is a big party school, in the Rolling Stones magazine. And they created a movie based on just how insane this guy's life is because he was just so over the top. And yeah, so like you're getting where kind of an idea of this dude, just an extreme party animal. But he was always a one-upper, not really listening, not asking follow-up questions, not internalizing what anyone was saying in any of these forums. He would just hear it and be like, well, I did this, or, this was way more insane. You guys hear this. And the person wouldn't be finished with the story half the time. So that's, and he's finally getting called out in the podcast world. Like people,
really?
Yeah, people hate him.
Huh.
I would say the majority of people listen to him. They make fun of him. Call him like Bart Chrysler instead of his real name and like shit like that.
Wait, what is his actual name?
Bert Chrysler? Bert Kreischer. I've forgotten so much because people just call him other versions of it.
Yeah.
Bert Kreischer. You listen to just a minute of him in any podcast, and you'll get like all of these in one.
Okay.
So as far as bad listeners,
So it's the
one upper.
One upper. What was the previous one? It was the
Keyword listener.
The keyword listener. The one upper.
The cutoff artist.
That's the next one.
That's the next one.
The cutoff.
I was waiting for you to cut me off. You didn't do it.
Sometimes I do, but
you're okay. So I compare this to people driving in traffic. Okay, so you're at a party, a lot of conversations are happening, traffic's congested. Okay, and I would say you are a very passive driver. You will let people jump in and cut you off, and I've done it. I'm not innocent of all of these. I know they're huge pet peeves, and I try to be great about it, but occasionally that happens.
Sure.
And you get excited about a topic and you jump in. But yeah, that's one that it sucks. And it's like you're driving in traffic and someone just keeps cutting you off and you can't finish your point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's all these different types of conversationalists are terrible.
They suck. They suck.
Yeah.
Last one is the space heads. These are all names I just made up on the spot. I don't know.
Sure, they're good names. They're excellent names.
I don't know if they exist out there or if there's other names for these, but this is what I thought of last night. The space heads. And they are people who are in their own fucking world. They're barely listening. They're not even looking for keywords. They're just kind of like drifting in and out of what you're saying. And you can see when you lose them. They don't give eye contact anymore. They aren't asking questions. They're just kind of, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And immediately it's like, why am I here?
Maybe you should be more interesting.
That could be part of it. Honestly, that could be part of it. But when you see it consistently from different people,
for sure.
Talking to them, not just me.
Yeah.
It's just a characteristic that they had. They're daydreamers, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
But they're just not prioritizing that conversation at all. And most times they don't. And I think that's probably to me, that's the least egregious of all of them, which is maybe surprising to hear that. Like, because I feel like it's the least conscious or intentional. I think a spacehead is usually just an idiot who struggles to, have the attention span in general, or they're just a super genius who's thinking about like world problems all the time.
They're trying to solve some physics, some nuclear.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that that's where you jump to. I would think that it's interesting that you would jump to them being dumb.
It's either spectrum.
Yeah, I feel like of all these ones, I'm probably mostly more the spacehead than all of them, because I think I can zone out. I will still be listening, but I'll zone out and like not participate sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, it's a problem I'm working on, whatever. But I think it's not out of like
even in one-on-one conversations?
Well, sometimes because sometimes in a one-on-one conversation, it's like, I don't like, this conversation is already over. I don't know why you're even still talking about this thing, right? Like, it's like,
so you've lost interest.
Yeah. It's like, we've already decided upon what the next thing is going to be, right? Or a lot of times it's like someone is maybe trying to apologize for something, or someone is trying to like get me to do something. And I've already decided 15 seconds ago that I accept your apology, or I'll do this, but you don't need to keep on convincing me. So I'm like, okay, like, sure. I just nod my head.
They're just repeating it because they want more validation, or they're nervous or whatever.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I get impatient with anxiety and, stuff like that. But that's a separate subject, I think. But all four of these types are awesome. So let's see. You have definitely described them very well.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why you think that is this way, or what else do you want to say? Yeah.
No, I have theories.
Okay.
So again, the space heads, I think it's because either they're too smart, they've lost interest, which of course happens. But if it's consistent, I'm talking about people who do this all the time.
Yeah.
not just occasionally, then yeah, either lack intelligence, lack attention span, or just way too smart and are in their own fucking world. The other three, I think, are all in the same bucket to me. The keyword listeners, the cutoff artists, and the one-uppers. I think it all stems from insecurity.
Interesting.
I think it's, like we said before, it's not being called out by a true friend, but for why they haven't fixed it. But the root of it is they are trying so hard to either impress other people, trying to look like they're very smart and cool and want to be entertaining, and they or again, like they're just extremely excited about a topic.
Yeah.
That they do these bad listening techniques that piss people off and make it so it's not a equitable conversation, a real conversation. And I think they get so used to it, and enough people don't call them out for it. And maybe they're just really attractive, so nobody wants to say anything, or maybe they're so unattractive nobody gives a shit enough to say, one way or other.
Or they're in a position of power in some way.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. Where that happens a lot. Yeah.
I get. Being attractive is in a way a position of power. You could say. Like,
yes.
You could. The insecurity in my head. The first thing I thought of was like an overconfidence thing. But I think you're right that it is like an insecurity thing. It's an outward overconfidence based on inward insecurity. It's like typical, I don't know, psychologists always say that like bullies are actually insecure, right, and all that stuff, right?
Right. I mean, overconfidence could be part of it if it's like a particular topic, like I said. Like going back to like the podcast world, like Neil deGrasse Tyson is a famous astronomer, right? Mm-hmm. He's one of the worst listeners I've ever seen.
You think so?
Horrible.
I'm going to go call him. I don't have his number, but I'll
right. He won't let you say a word, because if he knows you don't know about the topic, he doesn't want to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah,
he just wants to hear his own voice, just keep going. He's confident. He just wants to, because he's more focused on the audience, I guess, and just trying to get them the information. But like anybody trying to ask him questions, unless it's, so I usually listen to him because I'm interested in space topics a lot of times, and he's involved in a lot of those. I usually hear him with someone who's not an expert, like a random interviewer, Joe Rogan, whatever. Theo Vaughn, yeah. No. And he's cutting them off constantly. And you look at compilations of like worst podcast interactions. A lot of times it's him doing that shit, and they're getting frustrated and they're pissed off. But then I heard him most recently with another theoretical physicist who knew more about these topics than he did.
He met his match.
And it was a much more equitable conversation that I could actually listen to. And like I said, when I'm involved in these kind of conversations, I leave because it bothers me so much. If I'm listening to other people engage in these tactics, I turn it off immediately. It's just like, it's too painful, even if I really want to know what they're saying.
Yeah.
So this was the one time I finished a Neil deGrasse Tyson podcast because he was with someone who was his match in terms of expertise. And maybe it goes to the confidence thing where he's like, okay, I actually do want to hear what this person says.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because if I were Neil deGrasse Tyson, I'm an author. My job is to, what does he even do? I guess he's an author. He's a public personality.
He's an astronomer, but he's also the head of some space museum in New York. I can't remember the name of it.
Museum, but not like I'm building rockets type of thing?
No, he's not NASA or anything.
Yeah.
No.
So it's like his entire life is telling people things, right? Like it's
being a lecturer.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's part of it, because he's talking to Joe Rogan. What's Joe Rogan going to say that he, I guess maybe with someone like him, it might be overconfidence, not an insecurity.
Right.
But I think
in general,
it's more of an insecurity thing. And like, it's maybe more fixable to fix the insecurities than the overconfidence. You think so?
No, I don't think so.
You think so? You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think fixing insecurity is one of the hardest things you can possibly do.
Well, yeah, I guess
as a person. That's why people go through therapy and
Yeah.
do fucking drugs and whatever else they got to do to get over their insecurities.
Get over or forget about, I guess. Yeah.
So this is the part I wanted you to bleep out. So I want to give a couple of examples of people we know.
Yeah.
If you want to timestamp it.
I'm gonna listen to the whole thing and edit it out. So yeah.
All right. So the one we interact with more often is
interesting.
Now, among the ones I listed before, which do you think goes into?
Is a let's see. There's the.
I'll go through them again. The keyword listener, cutoff artist, one upper, or the space head.
One upper.
100%.
Yeah.
You got it right away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I definitely think that's insecurity.
1,000%.
Yeah, I think it's and I think I feel like the solution is to be more comfortable, right? Like to find a way to
make them more comfortable.
Yeah, I feel because when you're an outsider to a group in some way, like you wanna feel like you're cool. You wanna
outsider been around for,
but it's yeah, maybe you've been around on the fringes, but it's not. It's like you're around one person, but not the whole scene. There's 99% of everything else that's happening that's not in your purview.
Yeah.
Right. So I sort of.
You're sympathizing with position in the group.
Yeah. Not that I enjoy the thing you're complaining about, but it's just, I think, a place of understanding, I guess.
So I agree with you. Maybe not the being the outsider aspect, but that, it comes from insecurity. It comes from a place of hurt. Like I can sense that a little bit, and like trying to fit in so hard to like get more attention and more validation from the rest of us so that we bring in more or whatever.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, you've already been in, so you don't have to keep doing this. Like, we give you validation in the ways that it's deserved.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into more specifics because then it makes it very clear. But it's like, at this point, if you're not comfortable, it's just not going to happen. And therefore, me saying it is only going to make it, to me, because I've gone down this road of like, how do I solve this? If I point it out, even indirectly, then I think it only gets worse, not better, because it digs at the, oh shit, people don't like me thing, and I got to try even harder next time.
Yeah, that's it's one of the hardest things, is like trying to address I don't know if you'd call it a social condition, some sort of
personality quirk.
A personality quirk, yeah. But especially if it's a personality quirk that's like, well, I guess with any personality quirk, I think you're right. It's just so hard to address it. And it's easy to say, yeah, just tell them. But it's...
Certain people can take feedback and others can't. And I think a lot of times bad listeners are 100% in the category of people who can't take feedback very well. So let me give you another example.
Yeah.
I brought up...
Yeah.
Okay. Of the four, what
is keyword listener?
You can be a combination.
Yeah. What was the second one?
The cutoff artist.
The cutoff artist. I feel like he's a keyword listener in that just trying to argue with you.
Yeah.
Just trying to throw something back at you based on something you said. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's other aspects of the other ones in there too.
But yeah, I think majority of his keyword listener, he's waiting for you to say something that like he knows a little bit about.
Yeah. So
that he can attack you for it.
Yeah.
And that just becomes immediately frustrating. And then the last person who to me is the closest and it makes it hardest is and it's led to a lot of like frustration because just like you're more of a passive conversationalist in traffic, you let people cut you off too. I can't, again, bleep out all these But or maybe just cut this whole part out. But we get steamrolled in these conversations, and you're dealing with somebody who is smart, who is educated in a lot of different ways, reads up on a lot of shit. And therefore, if they're also cutting you off, a Neil deGrasse Tyson situation, like you just kind of like, okay, I give up. Now, I'm the kind of person that, you know, again, I will usually leave these conversations as much as possible. But if I'm forced to be there, I like will set immediate boundaries, be like, no, I'm going to finish my point.
Yeah.
And I'll make it in a way that's not so rude, but like definitely.
But it's making a point.
I'm making it obvious too, like, hey, cut it out. Yeah. Like, if we're going to talk, let's talk. And I think it immediately like trained to be like, oh, okay, I got to react differently.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is partner is also a passive conversationalist.
Yeah.
Very much. Which happens a lot of times. You get someone who's very talkative with someone who isn't, and that's very common. They balance each other out. But since every fucking word says when he does speak, because he respects it. So therefore, if you're in a conversation, you're getting cutting off everyone else, but then the one person not, you're like, what the fuck? You know, and then it becomes even more frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky one. I know some of the downers have experienced it, have commented on it. Again, it comes from insecurity.
Yeah.
But
well, maybe if they went to Harvard, they would.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's that. And how do you fix? So we root caused it. We explained it, categorized it. How do we fix it? For people who can take the feedback, yes. But the whole point is these people can't take the feedback. Can you do it indirectly? Can you do it forcefully? Can you do it very gently? Usually I don't get the message.
Yeah.
You know, it's so tricky, but I think what it really takes is somebody who's the closest to them to sit them down and be like, look, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And people care about you and they want to get closer, but they can't because of these issues.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably depends on the case, because sometimes it's the person that's closest with you that will be able to actually get through to you. But sometimes it's just like some random person, because everybody else, you're just sort of, you've already put them into some corner.
Or just accept that this is what it is and you've gotten used to it or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. And so like if someone random who you don't even know, who has no context on your life, comes up to you and says like, wow, you do this and it's not good. It actually might have a big impact, which is but it's really hard to set that up. So
a drive-by interventionalist?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, it's
could work.
And from like, I don't know what actually works for this type of thing. I think it's just a combination of all the things of life coming, you know, and you're experiencing everything and whatever. But sometimes what I'll do, which I don't know if it works, is either make it as part of a joke, because then it lands a little more softly, right? Yeah. And that's a pretty common approach, I think.
Yeah.
Or just like at some point, some very like opportune moment where it's obvious that this person is in a receiving mood, like they are ready. Maybe they've actually brought up some sort of insecurity and you're like, oh my God, I need to jump on this because this is my time to tell you how I feel, right? Use that to just, and like without anger, without any
judgment.
Yeah, without judgment, without sort of like, or well, actually with judgment, because you have to
there
say
is
like,
judgment, but there's a way of saying it with it's not so like they don't feel put on them.
Yeah, but sometimes it has to come with some pain. It's like, I know you maybe this comes, you know, you say to them like, maybe this comes from some sort of insecurity, like right, and you know they might immediately reject that, and you know then it doesn't work. But
they get defensive.
Yeah, it depends on who it is, the time, and a bunch of other circumstances. Maybe you just slip them some, you know, mushrooms and they.
Some psychedelics to wake them up. No, I mean, I agree with you that you got to be case by case with how you approach the solution. But I think in general, and this gets to one of the things you've brought up early on, was like, what's the best way to complain? I think if you first show concern and empathy and say like, I care about you and I've noticed this thing and I really want, us to have a better relationship. I think this would help. And you come from that perspective and maybe share like your own faults too, like your own vulnerabilities. Like I said at the beginning, like I know where my complaining comes from. I know I'm generally a glass half empty person. This glass is half empty right now. This glass of beer. But I know where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I try to compensate for that with actions that show that I care or humor or other ways that can overcome what can be a turnoff for many.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm still working on it because that's something I don't want my daughter to have. My whole motivation as an adult has been to build the stability that I didn't have as a kid, which means we talked about this before the podcast. Like I'm not a startup guy because it's too unstable. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to be at a big company that's going to be more, consistent and there for the long run.
You should leave that clown company of yours then.
At this point, yeah, it's become much less stable than it was before. So, and buying a house right away, like renting and investing is a very valid strategy financially, but you can be kicked out by your landlord at any moment. So I wanted to, with Mona, she was definitely pushing this for this initially, but buy a house so that you have that stability and don't have to fear unless you both lose your job for a long time.
Yeah.
And I save a lot, all this stuff to build the stability so that the rockiness and like the not knowing where I'm going to be and where I'm going to be living and what school I'm going to and who my friend group is and all that shit, she doesn't have to worry about that. So build that stability in her so that she doesn't have to come from a skeptical, negative point of view on most things. But having said that, I do think there is some advantage in this whole complaining thing, in this kind of judgmental mindset and kind of looking for what the negatives are, what the dangers are, to an extent, like to moderate it, because it's the reason we have this instinct, the reason we do judge sometimes based on race, sometimes based on looks or whatever, is it's for safety. It's to protect yourself. If I'm on BART and I see some crazy homeless guy who looks kind of creepy, I notice that from 2 cars away. Like before I get on the train, I'm looking at who's there. I'm scanning.
Yeah.
Scanning. Who looks dangerous? Mm-hmm. And I'm making judgments. And maybe that's completely off and wrong, but I'm doing that to protect myself. So whereas I have a funny story with Mona. We're in the subway in New York. Crazy homeless guy comes up and he's like, "That's a nice ring." He's looking at her wedding ring. And she's like, "Oh, thank you." And she kind of like holds it up and shows him and like just being friendly, because that's her. And I love that in her, that she's constantly like sees the best in people and is optimistic. But to me, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
He's going to steal that.
He's going to steal it, or he's going to, attack you or whatever the fuck and creep you out. And I like immediately got in the middle of like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
But like, that's just different ways of seeing the world. And I think if you have like a balance, it can help.
Yeah. If you have a little bit of that scrappiness, I guess. Not necessarily scrappiness, but
growing up in the mean streets of 9 Mile, baby. So close to 8 Mile.
Yeah.